Mr. Walangitang, welcome to Horváth & Partners.
Thank you very much for sharing your valued time.
Thank you for visiting us in Stuttgart. I hope you had a safe trip today.
No risks, I'm alive. But actually, how do you define a risk? I assume if I was run over by a car, I could probably die. If I drank my coffee too fast, I would maybe burn my throat.
Actually, both is correct. In the first case, it's an event, like you getting into an accident, that creates a risk. In the second case, it's a process issue, like you drinking your coffee way too hot, that can materialize into a risk situation. So actually, external factors, when happening, can create risks, but also internal factors or issues, when not treated properly, can cause risks.
But that's not how you approach the subject, right? If I ask for absolute basics as a contemporary industrial companion, how would you start?
In general, a risk is always a negative deviation from an expected outcome or result. And
means a positive deviation would be like a chance, and the combination of both
would merge into a prognosis, exactly. So when talking about risks, we always need to consider two aspects. First, the likelihood of a risk event to occur, and secondly, the impact of the risk when occurring. Both needs to be considered and both can be measured.
Why do you use the term likelihood versus probability? Ain't that equal?
No, it's not. A likelihood is always based on a calculation that is founded by rational conclusions or circumstances, whereas a probability is always based on the fact that something has happened already before and is probable to happen again. But be careful, also consider interdependencies and correlations between risks. So for example, the fact that a volcano hasn't erupted for a long time doesn't automatically mean that it won't erupt in the near future. Maybe it's even the other way around and it will erupt way sooner than you expected.
That's nice for perspective. But how does your definition then translate into the street accident that kills me or the hot coffee that burns my throat?
Oh well, that's actually a very dire example, but for the sake of argument, let's stick to that. So when you consider being killed by a car, that would mean you're not able to earn your livelihood for the remaining time of your professional career. So if you could estimate the amount of money you would have made in those remaining years and multiply that by a hopefully very low probability of being hit by a car, you would have the amount of the risk occurring when you're being hit by a car. On the other hand, your habit of drinking your coffee too hot may easily lead to serious health consequences. So in order to estimate this risk, you would need to make an assumption for example, the possible costs of a health treatment when you burn your throat, again, multiplied by the likelihood of that happening. Again, you would have the amount of that risk occurring.
Now I think you have explained intuitively a very important principle of risk management. Effective risk management requires knowledge about possible detrimental events and process issues, and also about measures that either reduce the likelihood or the impact of the related risks, or both of them.
Exactly. So please use some very cold milk into your hot coffee in the future.
For my understanding, please help me with a useful distinction between risk management and crisis management. In my industrial environment, I have to notice the current pandemic crisis reveals that many people do not really know to differentiate between both items.
Well, our larger industrial clients consider crisis as risks that are covered within their existing risk management framework. So as long as a crisis is not happening, it is a risk with a certain likelihood. As soon as the crisis happens, it is a risk that needs to be mitigated according to the agreed mitigation activities. Mitigation activities would be defined in the crisis management plan. So the crisis itself as a risk is part of the risk management framework. The execution of the mitigating activities is defined in the crisis management plan. That's the difference.
And how do industrial companies then integrate crisis management into their risk management systems and processes?
Well, actually, crisis management is considered a mitigating action as any other risk mitigating action. So the same methods and approaches apply as for any other risks. So it's not a big difference, actually. Unfortunately, the current COVID-19 pandemic is the worst business disruption most, or actually all of our clients have ever experienced so far. And of course, most or none of them were actually able to really foresee the impact that the pandemic will have on them. And of course, a crisis may also lead into other risks that occur after the crisis has materialized itself. So for example, if you have a product risk that might lead to, in worst case, a product recall, there are several other risks that will materialize after that. For example, a liquidity risk, for example, a profitability risk, and in the worst case, even a reputational risk, depending on how, let's say, important that product is for your company.
Thank you for highlighting the differences and commonalities of risk management and crisis management. There are indeed some overlaps and distinctions as well. Please let us amplify risk management in greater detail. I imagine a multinational industrial group that aims at defining a common method to mitigate all the risks the group may face over time. How do you facilitate the implementation?
As a first and most important step, the company needs to establish a common understanding of the term risk and its relation to the company's strategy. This needs to be defined on a board level and then communicated to all, let's say, the regions, subsidiaries, and local teams. This is the most important aspect to get into a common understanding of the term risk and what it means in relation to the company's strategy. Secondly, common measurement criteria need to be defined that define the financial impact a risk has on the company. Only by doing this, we enable different organizations within the company, different regions, different subsidiaries to talk on the same level about the impact risks actually have. For example, one criteria could be a missed sales target. So missing sales will have a financial impact which then will also have an impact on the EBIT. And this is some common criteria that could be used, for example, to have a common knowledge or a common language.
So if the definition is clear for all participants and board members are confident that management has established a common understanding of risk throughout the group, what other elements does the group need in order to implement risk management?
Well, actually, a pragmatic and comprehensive risk process and clear responsibilities. It's also important to consider risks and their impact before and after the mitigating action, so to achieve a net result of a risk, so to speak.
In other words, risk management requires 4 assessments: likelihood before and after, and risk impact before and after measures.
Yes, that's one aspect. In addition, of course, each company has to define their specific risk areas that are relevant for the company's business and its business model. So financial risk, operational risk, supply chain risk, risks in IT, risks in HR, even risks that are related to compliance requirements. And in all these risk areas, risk owners need to be defined that can assess and mitigate those risks. Having an understanding of the impact and the likelihood of the risks, they're able to report those risks into the risk management system to a central risk function where risks are consolidated and put into a management report or dashboard, if you will.
Now it appears to me like risk management can easily drive a company into a complex exercise.
Not necessarily. Of course, if individuals spend more time understanding how to report risks instead of what to report, the underlying process might be an overkill and definitely needs to be adjusted. On the other hand, if having pragmatic, comprehensive risk management processes and clear responsibilities, risk information can be collected and can be used to add additional valuable info to the company management processes. Also, we typically recommend implementing thresholds for risks. So not all risks are going into the risk report. Otherwise, it would be overloaded with small risks that do not have a significant impact on the company. So putting a threshold on that will help people focus on the most important risks and, of course, help them manage those appropriately.
Besides, risk management actually also includes a top-down communication of certain requirements and a bottom-up communication of crucial information.
Absolutely. Communication has to go both ways. Otherwise, the risk management system will not work.
After all this, and based on your experience, what is your opinion about risk management in industries today, and where do you see risk management in future?
Well, at least all listed corporations, companies with a reporting requirement, some privately owned companies, mostly larger ones, and even some state authorities have implemented risk management processes that cover the basics of risk management. Unfortunately, most of them have implemented their risk management only because of legal requirements or because shareholders, creditors, or customers have asked them to do so.
Does this mean you are not entirely satisfied with the achievements of industrial companies in the field of risk management?
It definitely does. Some companies complete risk reports and perform their risk management processes as a pure obligatory act, whereas others start to develop their risk management as a strategic tool. And we strongly believe that the latter will succeed in the future.
What makes intelligent companies stronger? Why are they more viable economically?
Well, most companies apply a one-year cycle on their risk management. So risks are assessed and reported on a yearly basis. Although more and more companies are increasing their assessment and reporting cycles, getting more accurate and more up-to-date risk information into their management processes. Also, many companies treat risk on a singular risk basis, so estimating the effect a risk has on the direct result. Although more and more companies also understand that there are direct and indirect risks, so risks related to other risks and occurring in a row and then having a totally different result than when you consider individual risk. And only a few clients really try to get a grasp on very abstract risks that are not easily to capture with figures.
That means companies start introducing strategic elements into risk management, but I'm afraid they will perform in one area while failing in another, and maybe get lost in theoretical approaches instead of working on pragmatic solutions?
When implementing a risk management framework, pragmatism is key. And in order to avoid our clients falling into those pitfalls you just described, we developed the emerging risk management framework, ERIM, which just came out right in time for the pandemic. And we, of course, hope that this framework will help a lot of our clients getting out of the pandemic way better than with a traditional risk management.
But beyond COVID-19, ERIM may be useful for risk management in general.
Absolutely. ERIM covers a much broader perspective than the traditional risk management frameworks our clients use so far. For example, we've included extensive dynamic scenario modeling capabilities and also added advanced analytics components to that. In combination with a pragmatic risk management process, it allows to manage risks on a multi-year perspective from the initial stabilization during the crisis through a structured recovery up to a long-term risk and crisis management.
So far, there's lots of opportunities for further development of risk management during the next years. As risk management expert, do you also have a long-term dream?
Absolutely. It would be a highly digitized risk management, making use of state-of-the-art technologies to provide valuable management insights in order to create actual value for a company.
Mr. Jäck, thank you very much for this interview.
Mr. Walangitang, thank you.